He owned a private pool, but his nosy neighbors treated it like their own playground, all because of silly prejudice and a knack for looking down on folks. Malik Jackson hit back with a lesson they'd never forget. Before we jump in, let me know what city you're watching from down below. I'm curious how far this story's reached. And don't forget to follow the channel for more tales like this every day. Let's get started. At 35, Malik Jackson stood on his back deck, jaw clenched, fists tightening at his sides. His once pristine pool, his pride, his reward for years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice, was now a disaster zone. Beer cans bobbed in the water, cigarette butts littered the wooden planks, and damp, discarded towels were strewn haphazardly across his carefully arranged patio furniture. The stench of stale alcohol and chlorine mingled in the humid Atlanta air. This wasn't just a mess, it was an insult. Malik had come home early from a work trip, looking forward to kicking back and enjoying the peace of his own home. Instead, he was greeted by the unmistakable sounds of splashing and rowdy laughter. His stomach dropped. Not again. As he stepped through his yard, his worst suspicions were confirmed. 5 teenagers lounged in his pool, sipping beers like they were at a frat party. His towels were sprawled across his expensive deck furniture, now soaked with pool water and stained with God knows what. One kid, probably no older than 18, was flicking a cigarette into the grass, as if Malik's home was nothing more than an afterthought. That's when his patience snapped. "Out, right now," he barked, voice sharp, cutting through the humid air like a whip. The reaction was instant, startled yelps and hurried movements as they scrambled to grab their things. One kid, the cocky one, smirked as he slung a towel over his shoulder. "Take it easy, Mr. Jackson. The gate was open." Malik scoffed. "No, you climbed over." The smirk widened, but the kid didn't argue. Instead, he just shrugged, as if that simple gesture absolved him of any wrongdoing. They left in a flurry of wet footprints and beer cans, laughing as they disappeared down the street. Malik exhaled slowly, his pulse pounding in his ears. This wasn't just kids being kids, this was disrespect, plain and simple. And he knew exactly who was behind it. Karen Wheeler, his neighbor, the self-appointed ruler of the block, the woman who had never hidden the fact that she didn't think Malik belonged here. The woman who had made snide comments about how things worked in this neighborhood since the day he moved in. Malik had let a lot of things slide in his life, but this wasn't something he could ignore. The next morning, Malik was up early, his coffee untouched, as he stood by the window, staring at Karen's house. The pristine white shutters, the neatly trimmed hedges, the over-the-top "Welcome to our home" sign hanging by the door, it all looked so polished, so perfect. But Malik knew better. Behind that carefully curated image was a woman who'd decided, for no good reason, that he didn't belong. Enough was enough. He marched across the street, his footsteps firm against the pavement. The early sun cast long shadows over the neighborhood, birds chirped lazily, and a sprinkler hissed to life somewhere in the distance. It was the kind of quiet, peaceful morning Malik had hoped to enjoy, if only his backyard hadn't turned into a community pool overnight. He knocked sharply. A beat passed, then another. Finally, the door creaked open, and there she was. Karen Wheeler, 42, blonde highlights just a little too perfect to be natural, dressed in an expensive-looking athleisure set that screamed suburban power trip. She arched a single eyebrow, her expression unreadable, but the amusement in her eyes was impossible to miss. "Well, good morning, Malik," she said, leaning against the doorframe, her voice oozing artificial politeness. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Malik cut straight to the point. "Your kids and their friends were in my pool last night." Karen sighed dramatically, as if he'd just complained about the weather. "Oh, don't tell me you're mad about that. They're just kids enjoying the summer." His jaw tightened. "They trespassed, drank, trashed my property." "They're teenagers," she interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "This is how things work around here, Jackson. People share. It's just a pool. Don't make a fuss." There it was. That little emphasis on Jackson. That slight tilt of her head, the way her lips curved, just enough to let him know she wasn't talking about his home. She was talking about him. Malik forced himself to stay calm. He'd been here before, brushed off, spoken down to, made to feel like an outsider in a place he had every right to be. "This isn't about sharing," he said, voice even. "This is about respect. It's my property, and I don't want them in my yard." Karen just smirked. "Oh, Malik," she sighed in that condescending tone that made his blood boil. "Newcomers like you don't always get how things work around here, but trust me, this is just the way of the neighborhood." Newcomers. She said it like he hadn't lived there for 3 years, like he hadn't earned his place, like he wasn't supposed to be here. Karen must have seen the shift in his expression because she tilted her head slightly, her smirk widening. "You'll get used to it," she added, voice dripping with false sweetness. And with that, she shut the door in his face. Malik stood there for a long moment, jaw clenched, pulse pounding. This wasn't just neighborly rudeness. This was her way of letting him know she didn't see him as an equal. And she wasn't going to stop. He could put up locks, put up signs, but deep down he already knew this wasn't over, and if Karen wanted a fight, she was going to get one. Malik spent the rest of the day thinking. This wasn't just about a bunch of teenagers hopping a fence. Karen had made it clear she didn't see him as a real part of this neighborhood, and because of that, she thought she could take what was his. She thought he wouldn't push back. She was wrong. By sunset, Malik had a plan. First, he reinforced the gate. The old latch was sturdy, but he upgraded to a commercial-grade lock, one that required a key and wouldn't budge with a shove. Next, he installed security cameras at every angle of his yard, making sure nothing happened without him seeing it. Finally, he went online and ordered bright, impossible-to-ignore signs. Private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Simple, direct, and not up for debate. By the time he was done, the backyard finally felt like his again. He sat on the edge of the pool, legs dangling over the water, letting himself breathe. The summer air was thick, cicadas humming in the trees, the scent of chlorine still hanging in the air. For the first time in weeks, he felt in control. And then, Saturday rolled around. Malik had barely stepped out to grab groceries when his phone pinged. Motion detected. Backyard. His stomach twisted. He pulled up the live camera feed, and his blood boiled. Karen's crew was back. It wasn't just the teenagers this time. It was a full-blown invasion. A dozen people, adults, kids, even a couple of strangers Malik had never seen before, were lounging by his pool like it was a public park. Music blasted from a Bluetooth speaker, beer cans lined the pool's edge. Someone had even dragged a full-sized cooler onto his deck. A woman in oversized sunglasses lounged on his patio chair, sipping his lemonade from his glass, like she owned the place. Malik gritted his teeth and turned the car around. When he pulled into the driveway, a man he didn't recognize lifted a beer in greeting. "Great setup, pal," he called out, as if he were complimenting a resort instead of trespassing. Malik slammed the car doors shut. "Everyone out, now!" The music cut. People turned, blinking at him like he was the intruder. A few had the nerve to roll their eyes. Karen said it's fine. Someone muttered, taking another swig of beer. "Aaron, of course." Malik stepped forward, voice steady. "Karen doesn't own this house. I do. And I didn't invite any of you." Finally, people started scrambling. Some grabbed towels, others snatched up their bags, moving like they had all the time in the world. When the last straggler finally climbed over the fence, because of course they hadn't even used the gate, Malik surveyed the damage. His deck was a sticky mess of spilled drinks. Wet towels were draped over furniture. Cigarette butts were jammed between the planks. The pool water was cloudy with sunscreen and floating bits of snack food. Karen stood on her porch, watching with amusement. "Don't be so uptight, Jackson," she called out, sipping a soda like she hadn't just orchestrated an entire home invasion. "It's just a pool." Malik stared at her, his anger a slow-burning ember in his chest. She wanted to play games? Fine. She had no idea who she was messing with. A week passed. Malik tightened security, locked the gate every night, made sure his cameras were rolling. It didn't matter. The intrusions got worse. By the following Saturday, it wasn't just casual trespassing anymore. It was an event. He woke up to find 20 people in his backyard. They'd dragged chairs from his shed, smoke up lights, even brought a grill onto his deck. smoke curling into the morning sky like it was their damn 4th of July cookout. A kid tossed an empty soda can straight into the pool. A man with a cigar leaned back in one of his chairs, laughing. "Turn up the music!" Malik barely registered his own movement. He was at the back door in a second, throwing it open so hard it slammed against the siding. "Get out." For a second there was silence. Then Karen, lounging comfortably by the pool, lifted a hand lazily, barely sparing him a glance. "Relax, Jackson," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "We're just sharing." Malik felt something inside him snap. Sharing? This wasn't sharing. This was stealing. And they were about to learn exactly what happened when you stole from a man who had everything to lose. Malik didn't argue. Didn't yell. Instead, he pulled out his phone, took a long, slow photo of the crowd, and tapped the screen a few times. A moment later, an alarm blared through the backyard. A deafening, ear-splitting siren, loud enough to make people wince, covering the entire property in red flashing lights. A voice, "Calm, automated," boomed over the speakers. "Warning, warning, you are trespassing on private property. Security measures activated." Panic set in. People scrambled, knocking over drinks, nearly tripping over themselves to get to the fence. Karen shot up, face twisting in fury. "Are you kidding me? Jackson?" Malik, arms crossed, simply watched. "You were warned," he said evenly. The last of the intruders bolted, some leaving behind shoes, towels, and even phones in their rush. Karen, standing alone now, chest heaving, shot him a look that could kill. "You think you've won?" she hissed. Malik just smiled. "Karen," he said, voice smooth as glass, "I haven't even started." Karen thought she had control, thought she could laugh off Malik's warnings, keep pushing him until he backed down. But Malik wasn't backing down. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, phone in hand, reviewing the security footage. The arrogance, the entitlement. These people had strutted onto his property like they owned it, like he didn't matter. They were about to learn otherwise. He grabbed his keys and drove straight to the pool supply store. "Big plans?" the clerk asked, eyeing the haul of specialty pool dye Malik loaded onto the counter. "You could say that," Malik replied, a slow grin spreading. Back home, he worked through the night. First, he rigged the pool system with sky blue dye. Harmless, but impossible to scrub off skin for at least a week. Next, he put up new warning signs. Bigger, bolder, impossible to miss. Pool treated with chemicals, trespassers swim at their own risk. And for the final touch, he scattered a few empty canisters labeled Hazaras Pool Treatment near the deck. Completely fake, but they looked official. Then he sat back and waited. Sunday afternoon, the sun was blazing, the perfect kind of heat that practically begged people to jump into a pool. And sure enough, Malik's cameras caught movement. Karen and her crew, 15 of them this time, came swaggering into the yard. Coolers in tow, music blasting from a speaker. She took one glance at the signs, snorted, and waved her hand dismissively. "He's bluffing," she told the group, grinning. "Go on, get in." They obeyed without hesitation, cannonballing into the water like a pack of wild animals. Malik, watching from his window, smirked. 3 minutes. That's all it took. At first, nobody noticed. They splashed, laughed, and cracked open beers like it was business as usual. Then came the screams. Someone looked down at their arms. Blue. Another shrieked, rubbing furiously at their face. Bluer. Within moments, the entire pool erupted into chaos. People scrambled to get out, slipping, flailing, glowing like Avatar rejects lost on Earth. Karen surfaced last, her once white swimsuit now a glowing electric blue disaster. Her hair, ruined. Her smug confidence, evaporated. She whirled around, eyes blazing. "What did you do, Jackson?" Malik stepped onto the deck, arms crossed. "I warned you," he said simply. "Guess you should have read the signs." Karen stormed forward, dripping blue water all over his deck, finger jabbing at the air. "You think this is funny?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury. You ruined us!" Malik barely blinked. "No, you ruined yourself." Her friends weren't laughing anymore. They weren't even looking at her. They were too busy scrubbing at their stained skin, checking their phones in horror as pictures of their Smurf-like disaster flooded social media. Blue Crew was already trending. One guy groaned, staring at his reflection in his phone. "I have a job interview tomorrow, man." Another woman clutched her now permanently blue hair. "Oh my God, what am I going to tell my salon?" And then came the final humiliation. Karen, hands clenched into fists, opened her mouth to scream again, but just then, the first gaggle of neighbors started appearing. People stood on their porches, laughing, whispering, taking more pictures. A few old-timers, who had stayed out of this nonsense, chuckled from their lawn chairs. Well, Mr. Thompson, the retired school principal, called out, "Looks like karma came early this year." Karen's face twisted in rage. She looked around, realizing she had lost. Her reputation, destroyed. Her fake superiority, gone. Her leadership of the neighborhood, a joke. She had one choice left: retreat. With a furious glare, she stomped toward the gate, leaving a trail of blue footprints behind her. Her crew followed, grumbling, covering their faces. One by one, the trespassers slinked away, glowing like neon regret. 2 weeks passed. Karen went into hiding. Her kids, still slightly blue. The internet, still roasting her. Lisa, Karen's sidekick, tried to restart her ticket-selling scheme, but nobody wanted to risk turning into a walking Smurf. And Malik, he made one final power move. With the neighborhood watching, he hired a professional crew to install a 10-foot-tall security fence. As the last panel was locked into place, Karen's front door creaked open. She stood there, silently fuming, her face still a faint tint of regretful blue. Malik turned, locking eyes with her. He smiled. Then, slow and deliberate, he lifted a brand-new sign onto the fence. "Property trespassers will be spray-painted blue." Again, Karen slammed her door so hard it rattled her windows. Malik just leaned back in his chair, finally enjoying his pool in peace. But little did he know, a new Karen had just moved in down the street. For the first time in months, Malik finally had peace. His backyard was his again. No beer cans floating in his pool, no cigarette butts jammed in his deck, no trespassers lounging on his patio furniture like they owned the place. The new security fence stood tall and proud, reinforced with locks, motion-activated sprinklers, and enough warning signs to make it clear: mess around and find out. Karen, she was done. Ever since Blue Crew had gone viral, she'd barely been seen. She walked fast, kept her head down, avoided eye contact. Malik had seen her once at the mailbox, still faintly blue around the edges. She flinched when she saw him, muttered something under her breath, and disappeared inside. The message had been received loud and clear, or so he thought. One lazy Sunday, Malik sat poolside, finally enjoying his private backyard, when he heard the sound of moving trucks. He glanced toward the street, raising an eyebrow as 2 massive U-Hauls backed into the driveway 3 houses down. A new neighbor. At first, Malik didn't think much of it. People moved in all the time. Maybe this time it would be someone normal. And then he saw her, a woman in her late 40s, stepping out of a gleaming black SUV. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, expensive yoga pants, and a clipboard in hand. She stood in the middle of the street, hands on her hips, surveying the neighborhood like she was inspecting it. Malik exhaled slowly. Oh no. Another one of them. An hour later, as Malik finished his drink, the inevitable happened. The new neighbor marched straight up to his front door. He barely had time to stand before she knocked. 3 sharp raps, perfectly timed, perfectly rehearsed. Malik opened the door, already bracing himself. She lowered her sunglasses, looking him up and down like she was evaluating a new employee. Then she smiled. "Hello there," she chirped, far too cheerful. "I'm Pamela Danvers. My husband and I just moved in down the street, and I'm the new president of the Homeowners Association." Malik blinked. "The what now?" Pamela continued, completely oblivious to his expression. "We'll be implementing some much-needed structure to this neighborhood, and I wanted to stop by and personally introduce myself." She paused, eyes drifting past him, toward his pool. Her smile faltered. "Oh," she said, voice dropping slightly. "I see you've installed a rather tall fence." Malik smirked. "That's right." Pamela pursed her lips. "Well, I do appreciate the effort to maintain boundaries, but we have certain aesthetic guidelines in this community, and I'm afraid this fence doesn't align with them." She tapped her clipboard. "I'll have to issue a notice for removal." Malik's smirk disappeared. "Removal?" he repeated. "Lady, I built that fence to keep trespassers out." Pamela waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, I'm sure that was just a misunderstanding. The last owners had such a welcoming spirit." Malik folded his arms. "The last owner was Karen Wheeler." Pamela's eyes lit up. "Oh, you knew Karen?" she gushed. "Such a strong presence in this neighborhood, it's a shame what happened." Malik barked out a laugh. "You mean the blue incident?" Pamela stiffened. "Well," she said tightly, "there's no need to dredge up old neighborhood drama. I just wanted to let you know we'll be reviewing your fence situation at the next HOA meeting." She flipped a page on her clipboard. "Oh, and I also noticed your pool is rather large. Have you ever considered opening it up for community use?" Malik stared at her. This had to be a joke. Pamela smiled brightly, misreading his silence. A shared neighborhood pool would really foster unity. Malik took a slow, deep breath. Then he spoke. "Pamela," he said, voice deadly calm, "I have one rule about my pool." She perked up. "Oh, and what's that?" He grinned. "Trespassers turn blue." Pamela blinked. Then, without another word, she turned on her heel and power-walked back down his driveway, furiously scribbling something onto her clipboard. Malik watched her go, shaking his head. A new Karen had arrived. And this time, do you want to hear what's next? Let me know below. Now, what do you think? Was Malik too tough or did they deserve it? Tell me, and stick around for more.